The blood-red Arizona sun cast long shadows across Kingman's dusty Main Street as Hannah Abernathy clutched her medical bag tighter, acutely aware of the 4 men blocking her path. The year was 1884, and being the only female doctor in Navajo County had earned her both respect and resentment today. It seemed the latter would prevail. "Ain't natural for a woman to be playin' doctor," sneered the tallest of the group, his fingers twitching near the holster at his hip. "Think it's time someone taught you your proper place." Hannah stood her ground, though her heart hammered wildly against her ribs. "I have a patient waiting. Step aside, gentlemen." The sound of a match striking steel drew her attention to the saloon's shadowed porch, where a figure leaned against a post. The ember of a cigarette glowed briefly, illuminating sharp features beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "For men threatening one woman," came a low, measured voice, "seems hardly sporting." "Mind your business, stranger," spat one of the men, turning to face the newcomer. The tall silhouette straightened, casually flicking away his cigarette. "Miss Abernathy's safety is my business." Hannah recognized him, then Lucas Sutherland, the quiet rancher whose property bordered the eastern edge of town. She treated his foreman's broken leg last winter, but had rarely seen the man himself. "We're just having a friendly chat," another man said, drawing his pistol. His companions followed suit, all 4 weapons now pointed at Hannah. "This don't concern you." Lucas stepped into the street, the dying sunlight revealing the Colt already steady in his hand. "They threatened her with guns," he said to no one in particular, his voice dangerously calm. "Then mine's already drawn." The tableau held for 3 heartbeats before the leader of the group reconsidered. "We ain't looking for trouble with you, Sutherland." "Then you shouldn't threaten the doctor." His aim didn't waver. "Kingman needs her skills more than your opinions." The men backed away slowly, holstering their weapons. "This ain't over," the tallest one muttered as they retreated down the street. When they'd gone, Lucas lowered his gun and approached Hannah. His face, weathered by sun and wind, revealed little emotion, but his eyes, a startling blue against his tan skin, held concern. "Are you all right, Dr. Abernathy?" Hannah released a shaky breath. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Sutherland. That could have ended poorly." "Lucas," he corrected, "and those men won't bother you again." She studied him, this quiet rancher who'd stepped in when no one else would. "I need to check on Mrs. Wilkins. She's in labor with her 3rd child." Lucas nodded. "I'll walk with you." "That's not necessary." "It is," he said simply, falling into step beside her. Hannah had always prided herself on her independence, but as they walked through the cooling evening air of Kingman, she found she didn't mind the company. Not at all. The Wilkins home stood at the edge of town, a modest wooden structure with warm light spilling from its windows. Hannah could hear Mrs. Wilkins' labored breathing even before they reached the door. "Thank you for seeing me safely here," she said to Lucas. "I may be some time." He nodded, tipping his hat. "I'll wait." "That's not—" "I'll wait," he repeated firmly. "Go tend to your patient, doctor." Hannah hesitated, then nodded gratefully. Inside, she found Sarah Wilkins in the advanced stages of labor, her husband pacing nervously. "Thank goodness you're here, Dr. Abernathy," Mr. Wilkins said, relief evident in his voice. "Sarah's been asking for you." The next hours passed in a blur of activity as Hannah guided Sarah through the difficult birth. The baby, a healthy boy, arrived just after midnight with a robust cry that made both parents weep with joy. "He's perfect," Sarah whispered, cradling her son. "Thank you, doctor." Hannah smiled, exhaustion settling into her bones as she packed her supplies. "Rest now. I'll return tomorrow to check on you both." Stepping outside into the cool night air, she was surprised to find Lucas still there, sitting on the porch steps. "You waited all this time?" she asked, incredulous. He stood, stretching subtly. Said I would. It's been hours. A man's word should mean something. He gestured toward the street. May I see you home? Too tired to argue, Hannah nodded. They walked in companionable silence through the sleeping town, the moon casting silver light over the wooden buildings. Why did you help me tonight? Hannah asked finally. Lucas considered the question. My mother died in childbirth when I was 10. The nearest doctor was 2 days' ride away. His voice remained even, though Hannah sensed the old pain beneath his words. What you do matters, Dr. Abernathy. Don't let anyone tell you different. They reached her small house, attached to her medical office on the quieter end of town. Thank you again, she said, standing on her porch step, nearly eye level with him now. For everything. He nodded once. I meant what I said. Those men won't trouble you again. Something in his tone made her believe him. Good night, Lucas. Good night, Doctor. He waited until she was safely inside before turning away. Hannah watched through her window as his tall figure disappeared into the night, wondering about the quiet rancher who'd drawn his gun in her defense and then waited hours to see her home safely. For the first time since arriving in Kingman 2 years ago, she felt truly seen. The following days passed without incident. Hannah continued her rounds, visiting patients throughout town and on outlying farms. The men who'd threatened her seemed to have disappeared, though she remained watchful. On Friday afternoon, as she was closing her office, a ranch hand arrived with an injured arm. Got caught in the fence, Doc, he explained, wincing as she examined the deep laceration. Boss said to come straight to you. Your boss has good sense, Hannah replied, cleaning the wound carefully. This will need stitches. As she worked, she asked casually, Which ranch do you work for? Sutherland's place, east of town, the young man answered. Name's Tom Jenkins. Been working there going on 3 years now. Hannah's fingers stilled momentarily. Lucas Sutherland? Yes, madam. Best boss I've had. Tough but fair. She nodded, returning to her task. How many hands does he employ? About 15 regular, more during roundup. Running close to 2,000 head of cattle now. Started with almost nothing 10 years ago. Built it all himself. Hannah tied off the last stitch. There. Keep it clean and come back in a week to have these removed. Tom reached for his wallet, but Hannah shook her head. Mr. Sutherland's already settled your account. The ranch hand looked confused. But I just got hurt this morning. How could he? He opened an account last week. For any of his men who might need medical attention. Tom grinned. That's the boss for you. Always thinking ahead. After Tom left, Hannah found herself pondering Lucas Sutherland more than she cared to admit. A successful rancher who defended women in trouble and ensured his men had medical care, he was not what she'd expected from the quiet, somewhat aloof man she'd occasionally glimpsed in town. The next morning, a delivery arrived at her door, a basket containing fresh bread, preserves, and a small box of tea. The note read simply, "For the doctor who never rests." Hannah felt her cheeks warm as she read it. The gesture was thoughtful without being presumptuous, and she found herself oddly touched. That evening, Hannah decided to thank Lucas personally. She hitched her horse to her small buggy and headed east out of town, toward the Sutherland Ranch. The ride took nearly an hour, the landscape changing from the scrubby desert near town to greener pastures fed by carefully managed water sources. The ranch house came into view as she crested a small rise, a substantial 2-story structure built of local stone and timber. Corrals and outbuildings stretched behind it, and in the distance, cattle grazed on the sloping grassland. As Hannah approached, a ranch hand spotted her and called out. Moments later, Lucas emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked different here, more at ease, yet somehow larger than he'd seemed in town. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing muscular forearms tanned by the sun. "Dr. Abernathy," he said, genuine surprise in his voice as he approached her buggy. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," she assured him, suddenly feeling foolish for making the journey. "I wanted to thank you for the basket. It was very kind." He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "You're welcome, but you didn't need to ride all this way." "Perhaps not," she admitted, "but I seldom take time for social calls. I thought I might make an exception." Something flickered in his eyes. "Pleasure, perhaps. Then I'm honored." He gestured toward the house. "Would you care to come inside? My housekeeper just made coffee." Hannah hesitated only briefly before accepting his hand to help her down from the buggy. His palm was calloused but gentle against hers. The interior of the ranch house surprised her. She'd expected a bachelor's sparse accommodations, but instead found a well-appointed home with comfortable furnishings, bookshelves filled with volumes, and tasteful artwork. "This is lovely," she remarked, accepting the coffee he offered. "My mother had good taste," he explained, inviting her to sit. "I've tried to maintain what she created." They talked easily, Hannah discovering that Lucas had been educated in Boston before returning west to build his ranch. He was well-read, with thoughtful opinions on everything from territorial politics to literature. "Why did you return to Arizona?" she asked. "You could have had any number of opportunities in the East." Lucas looked out the window toward the distant mountains. "This land is in my blood. My father homesteaded here, fought to keep it during the Apache conflicts. When he died, I couldn't let it go." Hannah nodded, understanding the pull of purpose. "I came west because doctors were needed more urgently here than in Philadelphia." "Was your family supportive?" She laughed softly. "Hardly. My father still writes monthly, imploring me to return to civilization and find a suitable husband before I'm completely unmarriageable." "And is that what you want?" Lucas asked, his gaze direct. "A husband? Perhaps someday," Hannah said carefully. "But not at the expense of my practice. Most men expect a wife to abandon her career." "Most men are fools," Lucas replied simply. The conversation shifted to safer topics, and before Hannah realized it, the afternoon had slipped away. "I should return to town before dark," she said, rising reluctantly. Lucas nodded. "I'll escort you." "There's no need. It's getting late, and the trail can be treacherous in the dusk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I insist." They rode side by side, Lucas on his chestnut stallion, occasionally pointing out features of the landscape or sharing stories about the region. Hannah found herself laughing more than she had in months. Halfway back to town, they stopped to rest the horses at a small creek. The setting sun painted the cliffs gold and crimson as they walked along the bank. "Thank you for visiting," Lucas said, breaking a comfortable silence. "It's been some time since I've had such pleasant company." "I enjoyed it as well," Hannah admitted. "More than I expected to." He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face and made Hannah's heart skip unexpectedly. "Perhaps you might visit again," he suggested. "Sunday dinner, if you're available?" Hannah considered her usual Sunday routine, reading medical journals and preparing for the week ahead. "I'd like that." They continued toward town as the first stars appeared, arriving at Hannah's house just as full darkness fell. "Until Sunday, then," Lucas said, helping her down from her buggy. "Until Sunday," she confirmed, suddenly shy. He mounted his horse, tipped his hat, and rode back toward his ranch. Hannah watched until he disappeared, wondering why she felt both unsettled and exhilarated. Sunday couldn't come quickly enough. The next few days brought a flurry of patients, a mining accident that required Hannah's attention for nearly 24 hours straight, followed by an outbreak of fever among several children in town. By Saturday evening, she was exhausted, having barely slept for 3 days. As she finally returned home, intending only to collapse into bed, she found Sheriff Miller waiting on her porch. "Evening, Doctor," he said, removing his hat. "Sorry to trouble you when you're clearly worn out." "It's all right, Sheriff. What can I do for you?" His expression grew serious. "Those men who threatened you last week, they're back in town. Been making noise at the saloon, saying they've got unfinished business with you." Hannah's exhaustion vanished, replaced by cold apprehension. "I see. I've told them to move along, but thought you should know." He shifted uncomfortably. "Truth is, Doc, one of them is the mayor's nephew. Makes things complicated." She understood the implication the sheriff's protection had limits when politics were involved. "Thank you for the warning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'd suggest staying close to home for a few days," he advised. "Or perhaps visiting friends out of town." After the sheriff left, Hannah sank into a chair, her mind racing. The thought of being driven from her home and patience by threats made her furious, but she wasn't foolish enough to dismiss the danger. She considered her options through the night, sleeping fitfully. By morning, she'd made her decision. After checking on her most critical patients and leaving instructions with the town's midwife, Hannah packed a small bag, left a note on her door directing emergencies to the midwife, and headed east out of town. The journey to the Sutherland ranch seemed longer today, her nerves stretched thin by exhaustion and worry. When she finally arrived, Lucas was working with a young horse in the corral. He spotted her immediately, handed the reins to a waiting ranch hand, and strode to meet her. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "Hannah," he said, the first time he'd used her given name. "What's happened?" She explained quickly, hating the tremor in her voice. "I'm sorry to arrive unannounced. I didn't know where else to go." "You did exactly right," Lucas said firmly. "You'll stay here until it's safe." He led her inside, calling for his housekeeper, Mrs. Garner, who quickly prepared a room and brought tea. The older woman's motherly fussing was exactly what Hannah needed, and she found herself relaxing slightly as she sipped the hot drink. "You look exhausted," Lucas observed, concern evident. "When did you last sleep properly?" "Wednesday, perhaps. There was a mining accident, then sick children." "Rest now," he said gently. "You're safe here." Too tired to argue, Hannah allowed Mrs. Garner to show her to a comfortable bedroom, where she fell asleep almost instantly. When she woke, disoriented, the shadows had lengthened, indicating late afternoon. She found Lucas in his study, poring over ranch accounts. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening. "Better?" Hannah nodded. "Much, thank you." "I'm sorry for imposing." "Stop apologizing," he interrupted. "You're welcome here for as long as necessary." He closed the ledger before him. "I'm riding into town tonight." "Why?" "To speak with the sheriff and resolve this situation." Alarm shot through her. "Lucas, no. These men are dangerous and apparently well connected. All the more reason to address this properly," he said, his calm demeanor masking the determination she saw in his eyes. "I won't have you threatened or driven from your home. And I won't have you putting yourself at risk for me," Hannah countered. "This is my problem." Lucas stood, approaching her slowly. "Hannah, when I defended you that evening, I made it my problem too." His voice was gentle but unyielding. "I protect what matters to me." The implication of his words hung in the air between them. Hannah felt her heartbeat quicken as he reached out, hesitating briefly before tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Trust me," he said softly. How could she deny him when he looked at her like that? "Be careful," she relented. Lucas left shortly after supper, promising to return by morning. Hannah tried to distract herself with books from his extensive library, but found herself constantly glancing toward the window, watching the road to town. Mrs. Garner provided companionship, sharing stories about Lucas that painted a fuller picture of the man. How he'd insisted on fair wages for all his workers, regardless of background. How he'd personally nursed his foreman through pneumonia last winter. How he never turned away travelers in need of shelter, regardless of their circumstances. In all my years working here, the housekeeper confided, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. We've only just become acquainted. Mrs. Garner smiled knowingly. Some things don't require time, just recognition. Hannah slept poorly that night, worry for Lucas keeping her from rest. She rose at dawn and waited anxiously, pacing the porch until finally, mid-morning, she spotted a rider approaching. Relief flooded through her as she recognized Lucas, but it quickly turned to concern when she saw he was riding slower than usual, his posture slightly rigid. She hurried down the steps as he dismounted carefully, noticing immediately the bruise on his jaw and the way he favored his right side. What happened? She demanded, doctor's instincts taking over. Are you hurt? Nothing serious, he assured her, though his wince as he tied his horse contradicted his words. Inside now, Hannah ordered, her tone brooking no argument. I need to examine you. In the parlor, she made him remove his shirt, revealing bruised ribs and several small lacerations. Her fingers moved gently over his injuries, assessing damage while trying to ignore the firm muscle beneath her touch. You were in a fight, she said accusingly, though her hands remained gentle. A disagreement that turned physical, he corrected, watching her face as she worked. With the men who threatened me? He nodded. They won't be a problem anymore. Hannah's hands stilled on his ribs. What does that mean, Lucas? What did you do? Nothing unlawful, he assured her, capturing her hand in his. I spoke with the sheriff, then the mayor. Made it clear that your continued presence in Kingman was non-negotiable. And when words failed, you resorted to fists? A small smile touched his lips. They started that part. I merely finished it. Hannah shook her head, torn between gratitude and exasperation. You could have been seriously hurt. Worth the risk, he said simply, his blue eyes holding hers. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had fully articulated. Hannah became acutely aware of his bare skin beneath her hands, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his pulse jumped at his throat. You're the most infuriating patient I've ever had, she managed to say, her voice not quite steady. And you're the most beautiful doctor I've ever known, he countered softly. Before she could respond, he leaned forward, wincing slightly, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Hannah found herself responding, her hands sliding from his ribs to his shoulders. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I saw you standing your ground against those men, he admitted. You were magnificent. Hannah laughed softly. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, he said, brushing his thumb across her cheek. It's acting despite it. She helped him bandage his ribs, her doctor's manner returning though her touch lingered more than strictly necessary. When she finished, he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. The sheriff assures me you can return safely to town, he said. The men have been escorted to the county line with instructions not to return. And the mayor has been reminded how valuable a doctor is to Kingman's prosperity. Thank you, Hannah said sincerely, though I still think you took an unnecessary risk. I disagree, Lucas replied, reaching for his shirt. Nothing about your safety is unnecessary. They returned to town together that afternoon, Lucas insisting on seeing her safely home despite his injuries. At her door, he hesitated. "May I call on you?" "Properly." Hannah smiled, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. "I'd like that very much." Over the following weeks, Lucas became a regular visitor at Hannah's home. They took Sunday drives in his buggy, attended church together, and shared meals whenever her busy schedule allowed. The town quickly grew accustomed to seeing them together, gossip giving way to acceptance of the courtship between the successful rancher and their dedicated doctor. Hannah found in Lucas something she hadn't realized she was missing: a partner who respected her work while offering companionship that enriched rather than competed with her calling. He never suggested she should abandon her practice, instead finding ways to support it. When her medical supplies ran low, Lucas arranged for new shipments from Tucson. When she mentioned needing more space for recovering patients, he organized volunteers to build an addition to her office. When she worked through the night, he brought food and coffee, sometimes simply sitting quietly while she tended the sick. For Lucas, Hannah represented everything he admired: intelligence, compassion, and unwavering determination. Her dedication to her patients reminded him of his mother's strength, while her independent spirit challenged him in ways no other woman had. Their courtship progressed steadily through summer and into fall. Then, in early October, disaster struck the region. A flash flood swept through a nearby mining camp, leaving dozens injured. Hannah worked tirelessly for days, saving those she could, comforting those beyond help. Lucas remained by her side throughout, fetching supplies, moving patients, doing whatever was needed without being asked. When it was finally over, he found her sitting alone in her office, staring at her blood-stained hands. "You did everything possible," he said gently, kneeling before her. "Some were beyond saving before they reached you." "I know," she whispered, "but it never gets easier." "It shouldn't," he replied, taking her hands in his. "That's what makes you extraordinary." He helped her wash away the blood, then held her as she finally allowed herself to weep from exhaustion and grief. When the storm of emotion passed, he led her home, made sure she ate, and watched over her as she slept. The next morning, Hannah woke to find Lucas in her kitchen, preparing coffee. The domesticity of the scene struck her deeply. How natural it felt to have him there. How empty her home seemed when he was absent. "I've been thinking," he said, handing her a steaming cup. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, grateful for the return to normalcy. He smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "I love you, Hannah. I think I have since that first night, when you stood your ground despite your fear." Her heart seemed to pause, then race forward. "Lucas, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and your calling. I would never want you to be less than who you are." He took her hand. "I'm asking if you might consider combining your life with mine, continuing your practice while sharing my home, my name, my future." Hannah set down her cup, emotion closing her throat. "You're proposing marriage?" "Inelegantly, perhaps," he admitted with a small smile. "But yes, I love you, Hannah Abernathy. Will you marry me?" In that moment, all the fears that had lingered in the corners of her mind, that he would eventually expect her to conform to traditional expectations, that marriage would mean surrendering her independence, dissolved in the face of his steadfast respect for her work. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Sutherland." The joy that transformed his face was worth any uncertainty she might have harbored. He pulled her close, his kiss a promise of the life they would build together. They were married in November, a small ceremony in Kingman's church with the whole town in attendance. Hannah wore her mother's lace wedding gown, sent from Philadelphia along with a letter of reluctant blessing from her father. Lucas stood tall and proud in a new suit, his usual reserve giving way to undisguised happiness as she walked toward him. Their arrangement was unconventional but effective. Hannah maintained her practice in town while making the Sutherland Ranch her home. Lucas added a small medical office to the ranch house for emergencies among the hands or neighbors, and ensured Hannah had reliable transportation between town and home. The townspeople gradually adjusted to their doctor's new schedule, appreciating that she remained committed to their care despite her marriage. Some of the older women who had initially disapproved of Hannah's profession now proudly told visitors about our doctor who had married the most successful rancher in the county. Winter arrived, transforming the landscape with occasional snow that dusted the distant mountains. Christmas approached, bringing with it preparations for their first holiday as husband and wife. Lucas surprised Hannah by arranging for her younger sister, Eleanor, to visit from Philadelphia. "How did you manage this?" Hannah asked, embracing her sister tearfully. "I may have corresponded with your father," Lucas admitted. "We've reached an understanding." The holiday was everything Hannah could have wished for her beloved sister, her new husband, and a home filled with warmth and laughter. On Christmas Eve, after Eleanor had retired for the night, Lucas led Hannah to his study where a small package waited on his desk. "One more gift," he said, watching as she unwrapped it. Inside was a silver medallion inscribed with the medical caduceus on one side and their intertwined initials on the other. A sturdy chain threaded through it. "It's beautiful," Hannah said, turning it in her hands. "I thought you might wear it when you're working," Lucas explained. "A reminder that you carry my heart with you, even when duty calls you away." Hannah blinked back tears as she placed it around her neck. "I never thought I could have both my work and this kind of love." "You deserve both," he said simply, drawing her close. "Always." Spring brought new life to the ranch, and a surprise for them both. Hannah was expecting their first child. The news filled Lucas with equal parts joy and concern. "You'll need to rest more," he insisted, hovering as she prepared for her day's rounds. Hannah laughed. "I'm pregnant, not ill, Lucas. Women have been combining motherhood and work since the beginning of time. Not all women are frontier doctors riding miles between patients," he pointed out. They compromised Hannah would continue her practice with reduced hours, and Lucas would hire a young doctor from Tucson to assist her during the later months of her pregnancy. The arrangement worked well, with Dr. James Cooper proving both capable and eager to learn from Hannah's experience. As her pregnancy progressed, Hannah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. 3 years ago, she'd arrived in Kingman alone, determined to prove herself in a profession dominated by men. Now she had a thriving practice, a husband who championed her work, and a child on the way. The baby, a daughter they named Sarah Eleanor, arrived in late October, delivered by Dr. Cooper under Hannah's exhausted but precise instructions. Lucas paced outside the bedroom until the infant's first cry rang out, then burst in to find his wife pale but triumphant, their daughter cradled in her arms. "She's perfect," he whispered, overcome with emotion as he touched the baby's tiny hand. "She is," Hannah agreed tiredly, "though I believe my medical training failed to adequately prepare me for experiencing childbirth from this perspective." Lucas laughed, kissing her forehead. "You were magnificent, as always." Recovery from the birth took longer than Hannah's impatient nature preferred, but with Lucas's loving insistence and Mrs. Garner's practical help, she allowed herself the time to heal. By Christmas, she had resumed limited practice, often with baby Sarah accompanying her on visits to less serious cases. The following spring brought another change. Hannah's father arrived unannounced from Philadelphia, ostensibly to meet his granddaughter but clearly also to inspect the life his headstrong daughter had created. Dr. Charles Abernathy was a distinguished physician with rigid views on propriety. His initial reaction to Hannah's unconventional arrangement was predictably disapproving, But over the course of his visit, something shifted. He watched his daughter confidently diagnose a difficult case, observed the respect she commanded in town, and witnessed the supportive partnership she shared with Lucas. On his final evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "I may have been mistaken," he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. "About your coming west. About your marriage." Hannah, cradling a sleeping Sarah, glanced at him in surprise. "That's very nearly an apology, Father." "Don't push your luck," he grumbled, but his eyes held warmth. "You've built something remarkable here, Hannah. Your mother would have been proud." The words, from a man so sparing with praise, meant everything. As her father's visit came to an end, Hannah found herself reflecting on how far she'd come from the frightened but determined woman who'd faced down threats in Kingman Street 2 years earlier. That confrontation, terrible as it had seemed at the time, had led to Lucas stepping from the shadows, gun already drawn in her defense. One evening, after Sarah had been settled for the night, Hannah found Lucas in his study, reviewing cattle contracts. She slipped onto his lap, interrupting his work with a kiss. "Not that I'm complaining," he said when they parted. "But what prompted that? I was thinking about the night we met," Hannah explained, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "How different my life might be if those men hadn't threatened me, if you hadn't been there." Lucas considered this, his hands settling at her waist. "I'd like to think we would have found each other eventually. Some things are meant to be." "The very practical rancher believes in destiny?" she teased. "I believe in recognizing what matters when you see it," he corrected, pulling her closer. "And you, Dr. Sutherland, matter more than anything." As the years passed, their family and ventures grew together. Hannah trained a succession of young doctors, expanding medical care throughout the county. Lucas extended his ranch holdings, introducing improved breeding stock that made the Sutherland brand known throughout the territory. Sarah was joined by 2 brothers, Thomas and William, all 3 children growing up with their mother's intelligence and their father's quiet strength. Kingman itself evolved from a rough frontier town to a more established community, with Hannah and Lucas contributing significantly to its development. They helped found a proper hospital, expanded the school, and supported the railroad's arrival, which brought new prosperity to the region. Through it all, their partnership remained the foundation, Lucas never wavering in his support of Hannah's calling, Hannah bringing her compassion and insight to every aspect of their shared life. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas surprised Hannah with a journey to San Francisco, leaving the children in Mrs. Garner's capable care. They spent 2 weeks exploring the city, attending the opera, and walking along the bay, a cherished respite from their busy lives. On their final evening, as they watched the sunset from their hotel balcony, Lucas presented Hannah with a leather-bound journal. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find blank pages. "For your memoirs," he explained, "the story of a remarkable woman who became a frontier doctor, saved countless lives, and somehow found time to civilize a rancher along the way." Hannah laughed, leaning against his shoulder. "And what about your story? The rancher who drew his gun to defend a woman he didn't know, then waited patiently while she delivered a baby." "My story is simple," Lucas said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I recognized what mattered most, and made sure not to lose it." As the sun sank into the Pacific, painting the sky in colors more vivid than even Arizona's legendary sunsets, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that tense confrontation on Kingman's dusty street to this moment of quiet connection, they had built a life neither could have imagined alone. "They threatened her with guns," Lucas had said that night, "then mines already drawn." Simple words that had changed everything, not because he had saved her, though he had, but because in that moment, he had seen her worth and stepped forward without hesitation. In the end, That was love's true power, not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but the quiet, unwavering decision to stand beside the one who mattered, whatever might come. As darkness fell over San Francisco, Hannah turned in her husband's arms, finding his lips with hers. "Take me home," she whispered against his mouth. Lucas smiled, the same smile that had first captured her heart a decade ago. "Always," he promised, and he did.